Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. So this session is just a session that we didn't record at the Lightweight Adventurous Festival because we kind of ran out of time. So it's the TAMP podcast versus Real Riders with REEL Riders and the Lightweight Adventurous podcast. I got a bunch of listeners to send in questions for all of us, or for one of us, or for two of us. Sadly, Jamie can't make it because he goes to bed at 5 o'clock in the evening for some reason in whatever secret place he's living now. I thought it'd be good because we prepared for this session. Let's turn it into a podcast rather than miss out completely. So I'm very happy to welcome Mark Derry from the Lightweight Adventurous Festival.
Hello, I'm here.
Good man. Simon Josie from the Real Riders podcast, and new best podcasting friend. But before we jump into it,
Wow.
Second best, third best. He's in the top three, Mark.
That was brutal, wasn't it?
He's in the top five. We've got Bruce and all those other people to think about as well. Before we dive into it, do you want to just do some quick introductions and tell us a little about your podcasts? Noel, we'll start with you.
Jesus, was not expecting that. No, I can't do it. I can't describe it.
Of course you can.
Well, describe the podcast.
Yeah.
Well, it's just, I can only think of other people's words where we've just been described as two old blokes down the pub talking about
trail and adventure motorbikes.
What you're struggling with there is because you're trying to describe an emotion and an experience, aren't you? That's what you're trying to say, yeah.
Oh, God, don't get me onto emotions.
We don't do all that stuff about feelings that you do.
You should get into podcasting, Noel. You've got a way with words.
You should have told me about that. I would have come up with something.
That's a great description, Noel. Well done.
I'm a listener.
Mark, tell us about your lame podcast. Sorry, LWA, isn't it? Sorry, that's not lame.
The Lightweight Adventurous podcast. We started podcasting around about 18 months ago, and we wanted to take a different take on podcasting. Well, not a different take on podcasting, a different take on adventure podcasting. So we made it all about mindset, attitudes and opinions, because that's ultimately what Jamie and I teach the military. So we wanted to take it into an adventure slant. So we ask people questions that probably they've never been asked before. All about how their mindset felt and their attitudes and feelings and emotions, Noel, towards adventure.
All of this is what I was going to say if I'd been given 10 seconds more to think about it.
Thank you, Mark. Simon, tell us about Real Riders.
Real Riders I like to describe as a boutique podcast, very niche.
You haven't got many listeners, have you, yet?
Okay, you didn't need to point that out.
Who's editing this?
Maybe I will edit it after all. So it's the convergence of motorcycling and filmmaking. I like to interview people who ride motorcycles and make films. And I guess it grew out of my own curiosity of watching a whole lot of people posting motorcycling videos to YouTube and thinking some of them were pretty cool and some of them were a bit boring, and trying to figure out why.
To be fair, it's probably one of the best podcasts out of the three. It's fairly new as well, isn't it? You haven't been doing it that long, so the listener figures will get better. But I just thought it'd be useful just to look at some of the podcasting charts around the world and see how the three different podcasts are doing. Lightweight Adventures podcast. This week, Mark, congratulations. You were 38th in Sweden, Places and Travel.
You know, I'll actually take that because we've not recorded a podcast in about 6 months.
Last week, you were 223rd in the Netherlands as well.
I feel pretty good about that.
Places and Travel, but you've dropped out now, obviously. Simon's too new to have any chart appearances. But just this week, we are 12th UK Automotive, 15th South African Automotive. We're actually in 35 different charts globally, including first in Greece Automotive, fifth in India Automotive, and third in Norway Automotive. So that just gives you some idea of, the scale of where we are. Who's going to call me a wanker first?
Go ahead, Simon. Do you want to take first dibs, or?
I guess it's privileged to be invited to be on it then, really, isn't it? I guess.
Simon's wins because he was great from the second, 2 seconds in.
It's quality, isn't it? Be interesting, Simon, to hear a little bit about your professional background in radio and podcasting, because you are actually the only professional amongst us, which is why you sound so great.
I was never professional in front of the mic, always behind the mic. And I did two years straight out of school in Radio New Zealand, hence the funny accent. And I have to say I loved that job. Like, I really loved that job. I never didn't want to go to work, which is kind of unusual also for a 18, 19-year-old. I started off in outside broadcasting and then was just doing vocal studio recording. So that's, interviews. And then got into something which I really enjoyed, which was live radio. So putting news shows to air. And it was at the time of the fourth Labour government in New Zealand, which was kind of a volatile time in New Zealand politics. And so being in Wellington, being at the sort of the centre of broadcasting and very close to, like physically close to Parliament, it was just an interesting time to be involved in the industry. And then I left that and went to university, and I continued to do a bit of work in radio part-time while I was at university, which was good. And then I went off and had this career in telecommunications, mainly in Asia. I never sort of left radio or audio behind as an interest. And then with time on my hands here in Germany, I started doing some volunteer work with at least one podcast, picked up a little bit of paid work for a New Zealand-based podcast, and then really wanted to create something end-to-end myself. That was really my motivation, I guess. And I saw this niche, which was the filmmaking motorcyclist, and I sort of went for it thinking no one else was occupying the space. Having said that, I then started to listen to you guys, because I wasn't actually aware of you, TAMPod, before I started Real Riders. And when I started to listen to some of the later episodes, I thought, if I'd heard you guys beforehand, I probably would not have started Real Riders, because... No, seriously, just because of some of the guests you're able to pull, it's been great. And a lot of the questions that you ask are quite similar to the questions that I ask my guests. So, yeah.
You add something very special. If nothing else, it gives me and Noel something to listen to.
You could listen to the Lightweight Adventures podcast. What is this? Just in the spare corner here, aren't I?
In all seriousness, I do listen to your podcast. You need more than two to listen to, right? But I just want to say a massive congratulations on the festival, which was a couple of weekends ago. From all the feedback I've seen and heard and received, it was a massive success. I think me and Noel and Simon all really enjoyed it. So, yeah, well done to the whole team for doing that.
Thanks, I'll take that. Really happy with how it went this year. It's grown up a little bit from the first couple of years, hasn't it?
It really has. Feels proper now.
Did you actually enjoy it more than previous episodes?
Definitely is the short answer. Just like you and Clive understand it, running a stage, and funnily enough, as much as we're all podcasts and we all kind of like the sound of our own voice a little bit, otherwise we wouldn't do it. Once you've listened to yourself all day, wow, you do get bored of it, don't you? All of us were speaking from 10 o'clock up until on the Adventure Spec stage, close to 9-10 o'clock some nights. That's a lot of speaking. I tell you what the podcasting has done, and a few people pointed this out, it makes you listen really intently, doesn't it? And then come out with some questions based off the answers. There was a few serials on the stage where I was kind of invited up almost ad hoc to host a panel. And I was like, I've prepared absolutely nothing, zero, zilch. Yeah, I have to listen and then figure out these questions, but you can only do that by listening to people and understanding what they're actually saying rather than just going with the content, which I feel is where some podcasts go nowadays, actually. That's why I don't listen to a whole lot of podcasting, because I find some of them moderately shallow, But
we probably had a conversation about this, Simon, about that listening being such a massive part of it that I hadn't really anticipated before I got into it. And it was somebody else I heard who did a podcast who talked at length about it, who did a TED talk on it. But he said the biggest part of it for him and the biggest learning curve that he'd had to take on was just the whole listening, which he'd never anticipated. I find that all the time, that I'm having to listen intently to make it work.
Yeah, and the thing that I found also I've only done 13 episodes to date, and I found after the first 5, I thought, I'm just having the same conversation with different people, and it's like, how do I switch that up? And then more recently, when Mark and Jamie came on, we were talking about story and as a critical essence in sort of any creative activity. And I thought, actually, there's a challenge here for me to try and turn the podcast not into a story itself, but to get people to tell stories, even if we're talking about something fairly dry, but to actually convert what they're saying to make them tell a story when they're giving an explanation or whatever. And I think that's what hooks people.
Does anyone ever prime guests to sort of have a story with a beginning, a middle and an end, and to be aware of that?
No,
we don't.
I think that's what makes a successful podcast. I don't know how you guys have just got away with it. You've flown under the radar for a bit. But that's what makes a successful podcast host, isn't it? Being able to not taking the limelight. If a podcast host is taking the limelight, then I think you're in the wrong game.
I'm taking notes now.
This is all aimed at you, Clive. But if you're asking the right questions to make the guest look better, then you're doing it right, aren't you? Otherwise, just tuning into the Mark radio or the Clive and Noel radio, it's not that. That's why we all got bored of Chris Moores on Radio 1, because he we've just heard his voice all the while. But if you're making the guests look better than they would have if they were just on the microphone themselves, then you're doing a cracking job.
That's also why I spend an awful lot of time doing the edit as well, because you want people to sound great and come out looking brilliant. And if you're talking to somebody who sells products or a product, then again, you want to give them every opportunity to talk eloquently and help them market their brand as well.
But it's one of those everybody wins situations, isn't it? If the guest wins out because they look great, then the podcast looks great, and then the host looks great, and it's literally we lift everybody else up.
Podcasting is massively popular, or gaining in popularity these days. We're going back in time and reinventing radio in a way. I always describe to people that don't listen to podcasts, it's like you get to choose your own radio programs.
Can I ask you this question then? Because I had a go at this recently. I don't know if this is on topic or off topic before we get to the questions. Have either of you ever tried to record a solo podcast, just you speaking into the mic? Because I tried it the other day and it is really difficult.
I haven't.
You should try it.
I've often thought about it.
I wanted to document my upcoming trip, and I've been doing voice notes just for recollection. And I thought, I wonder how this would sound if it ever went out as a podcast, because, well, I have a podcast channel, so why not double up? Fair to say, what I recorded won't see the light of day. It's really difficult, and you definitely have to prep, and you definitely have to have a structure. Otherwise, it's meaningless ramblings. I challenge you all to have a go at it.
I was kind of doing this way back in about 2009 when I took a little dictaphone that I'd stolen from an office somewhere, and I made little recordings at the end of each day when I was riding in the Pyrenees, which I then just gave to my girlfriend at the end of it as this is what my trip was like.
Well, I wondered if I could do a weekly podcast on the road on this trip, just as a different way to document the trip. I'm also going to video it and take photos, all the rest of it.
I think it's worth a go.
If we had got to the bit where people and talked a little bit more about forms of podcasts, different styles, I probably would have said do not do a single voice podcast. I think there can be some exceptions to that. Like if you can be extremely disciplined to keep it down to less than 5 minutes, I think people will listen to that. But these people who think they're going to do a single voice hour-long podcast, forget about it. I mean, maybe there are people out there who like it. I mean, there are people out there who like 90 minutes of point of view video on YouTube, and okay, good luck to you. I think you have to be very careful, and I would say almost scripted, because otherwise it will be just waffle.
Well, that's exactly what it turned out to be, yeah. Luckily, I'll keep it as my own sort of thought journal, a recorded journal, But
I wonder if the real format on Instagram would lend itself to this, a series of photographs with a voiceover narration to it. It's very short, mind. I think it's 90 seconds perhaps. But
yeah, I was looking for an alternative to visuals, just somewhere where I could be a bit more reflective and a bit more... But another thing that I love about podcasting, and this is why we took it down the mindset and attitudes sort of entry, is because it gives a safety blanket to some people. They're coming on the podcast, like when we spoke with Bruce Smart on the Lightweights, and we were asking him relatively deep questions about some relatively deep feelings and emotions. And he's he's a middle-aged guy, typically of a policing background, typically doesn't talk about this. It's a faceless podcast, obviously, so it gives them a bit of a safety blanket. And when we came off the podcast, he went, I've never been asked those questions and I've never felt comfortable to answer them, probably because he's always got a camera in his face. That's what I love about podcasting. It gives that deep, reflective, you can be a little bit more vulnerable with it.
That's why I'm never coming on your podcast. Not that you've invited me, obviously.
We need to record a podcast.
We do. It'd be fun.
But Simon, just going back to what you said about not wanting to sort of have the same repertoire of questions, you didn't quite get to how you had sort of stepped away from that. Was it just listening more and reacting more spontaneously?
It's something that I'm constantly working on. I create a script for every time I record. That's sort of a practical way to try and avoid having the same questions. But I'm really interested in exploring this idea of creating questions which force people to tell stories. And once I've done that, I think, bingo, it almost doesn't matter what I'm asking if I'm getting people to tell stories around the topic. I think that's kind of the nirvana I'm looking for at the moment.
There's nothing stopping you from branching out into different elements of filmmaking. So you could do not necessarily speak to a filmmaker, but you could speak to Red, the camera company. You could do the stuff that we did at the festival about audio for filmmaking. There's loads of things you could branch out and do. You could do a whole couple of episodes on lighting and how to make the best use of natural lighting and all that kind of stuff, couldn't you, potentially?
For sure. I've got a couple of targets of people who make films who are not, should we say, on-screen personalities, because a lot of the people I do talk to do have some sort of presence on film as well as make the films themselves. But of course, yeah, there's a whole lot of people who are behind the camera. So you're absolutely right, Clive. There's a whole lot of people I could talk to.
We have a couple of questions, Clive, that we can never drop. We'll always want to know what people had as their sort of entry into motorcycling and how it happened.
And you get such a wealth of different answers as well. It's always quite interesting. Let's get into the questions sent in by the viewers, and I'm going to hand over to Simon for this.
I just want to emphasize and probably triple emphasize that I did not write these questions. I'm just the messenger here, okay?
I can't wait to blame you for these questions, Simon.
Did I tell you that I added some? Okay, yeah. This is a question for everyone, so you can all take a turn at answering it. A divine power can gift you a skill without having to learn it. You would immediately be a master of that skill. What would you like to have? But bear in mind, to get it, you would have to give up something you do now. And what would that be? What would be the thing that you're going to give up?
Quite late into my 20s, I used to have dreams about being a motocross rider. And I remember being able to jump as a kid and pull wheelies and do skids. And I always dreamt of literal dreams, not just hopes and wishes. These are actual dreams where I was just an awesome rider. So I think I still want to do that. I'm too old now, but I'd still like to be that guy. What would I give up? Probably empathy, because fuck you.
You're barely giving anything up there, aren't you? It was a skill that you can do at the minute, it said.
Parenting, I could give up parenting quite easily.
This is a very difficult one. I mean, I immediately think of music for some reason. I'm very envious of people that can play piano, and it would be very easy for me to give up my 3 chords on the guitar in exchange for my piano playing career. Don't know why piano, I just really fancy it.
I was going to say musical instrument. I'd love to play a music instrument. I guess it's left for the actual musical instrument because I used to do open mics on guitars and such. It's more because I think it would be lovely to entertain a crowd. So actually, I don't really mind if it was playing a musical instrument or if it was music or even doing stand-up or, just entertaining a crowd. That's what I'd love to be able to do in whichever guise that came.
By the way, when I said piano, what I actually meant was drums.
What about you, Simon? Have you thought about this?
Well, I hadn't, but funny you should say that. I think it would be awesome to be like a world-beating comedian. Just to have that skill, a little bit like what Mark was saying, just to be able to entertain people and not to be nervous about it, but just to really have a crowd in the palm of your hand. I think that would be extremely fulfilling.
Who's the world-beating comedian you'd like to be?
Even though Mark Maron's famous for his podcast, I quite like his humour. I really have gone right off Conan O'Brien's podcast because I don't think he knows how to interview people, but I really like his self-deprecating humour. I really like that.
Mark Maron's podcast, What the Fuck, Motherfuckers, What the Fuck Buddies, is absolutely brilliant. You can fast forward usually about 20 minutes and actually get into the podcast, get past all the adverts, but very good podcast too.
You know what I was about to say? It's just about you talking, Simon, about being a comedian. It's less about telling jokes, I think. But I'm always very envious of those guys that just turn up and make everybody laugh because of who they are. And we've all got that friend, haven't we? They're less of a Peter Kay or a stand-up, but that guy that walks in, tells us, or girl, obviously, but that person that walks in and just tells that story and everybody just like, aren't they brilliantly funny?
You guys have all got that friend.
Do we?
Go on, next question.
Quick round, this one. Dream journey, destination, and for how long?
Do you know what? I thought about this, and I'm not sure I've got a dream destination. There's no one particular place that I think I'd love to go there. I always wanted to go to Iceland. I've been to Iceland. I love going to America, but I've been to America many, many times. I've been to New Zealand. I've been to Australia. I suppose I need to spend more time in Asia and India. I'm determined to do the fjords in Norway as well. But not for that long. I don't want to go away from home for too long. 3 weeks, tops. That'd do me.
Shot me in the fox, innit? Going away for 4 months.
You'll be back within a couple of weeks, I reckon.
I'd like to go and see Mount Everest. That'd be my destination. I'd love to go to see the Himalayas, but particularly the Himalayas. But in particular, I'd like to see Everest. Don't know why, it's got a real draw. I think I'd enjoy the journey there more than the actual destination, perhaps. But if I had to just fly to somewhere or teleport to somewhere, I'd go there.
I'd love to go to Nepal, but I have a feeling it's never going to happen. So my more realistic dream is always just my next plan, and my next plan is probably to go to Sweden and Norway again, I think. Yeah, I just think about the next trip, and the next trip is hopefully something attainable and on my doorstep in Europe.
Do you guys never look at the world map and just think, it's out there and I should see it all?
No. You can't see it all. Yeah. It's impossible. Even if you travel the way Kinga does on her bike, she's spent 4 or 5 years and she only still sees a fraction of the world. So it's impossible.
Yeah, but it's something to aspire to, isn't it? That's how I feel about it. I feel like I want to see every single corner of the earth. And, I've travelled a lot, but I still feel like I've seen a fraction. Well, I have only seen a fraction, but I'm still desperate to see more.
No, I don't have that hunger.
No, I don't have that hunger particularly. But I've been to lots of corners of the globe, and I wish I had done it on a motorcycle because I didn't. But I'm not desperate to go return to America, I don't think, for a start.
For what it's worth, if I was given the opportunity, I would like to go back to Palau. I've been there once, but I would like to do a liveaboard dive trip there for maybe 10 days, 2 weeks, and particularly the south where a lot of the famous fighting was.
Those of us like Noel without the excellent geographical knowledge that you and I have. Where's Palau?
It's to the slight southeast of the Philippines.
Philippines, I was going to say Philippines, yeah. Yeah, it's a gorgeous part of the world. Love it there. The food. Oh, don't get me started on the food.
Pilau rice, love it.
Moving right along, thanks. If you did a trip together, and I don't know if this is going to be a threesome, but if you did a trip together but had to go on one bike, what would that bike be and who would ride? And I assume that means who's driving.
Easy answer for me. I'd let Noel drive. I'd go on the back. He could drop me off at the nearest fucking airport and I'd fly home. Not a chance in hell.
This is weird. We're all travelling on the same bike. Can it be a sidecar? It would have to be a sidecar. Oh, I don't know. It'd have just something comfortable, wouldn't it? It'd have to be a big Goldwing or something.
Well, let's rephrase the question then. Would any of you consider doing a massive road trip in like a converted bus, like a lot of the Americans do? I'm currently watching on Instagram these 5 friends, presume just friends, converting an old school bus to do Transamerica.
You've just watched a Cliff Richard film.
Yeah, that's it. Something about a summer holiday. I don't know what they're up to. But have you ever fancied doing something like that?
I have fancied doing something like that. I followed the guy on the internet, the Rust to Rome. It's a Scottish guy, yeah. I've always kind of it's a bit very geeky. It's a very geeky thing to do, but I do quite fancy that. I quite like the idea of the stick-it-up car going across Europe.
Again, the practical side, those big buses on those tiny European roads, that would just freak me out.
I'd love the challenge.
Not going on a bus.
Yeah, we're not going in a bus.
Where's your adventurous side, lads? I think that would just be a lot of fun, wouldn't it?
For me, every day on the bus, I'd just be looking out the window thinking how much better this would be if I was on my motorcycle.
Can only take one vehicle.
I've already been dropped off at the airport.
If you were a motorbike, based on your attributes and personality, which one would it be?
Harley Davidson, loud, useless, broken.
Bit soft and wobbly.
Yeah. And a bit shit.
At the moment, I would be the Honda Cross Tourer with the shaft drive and the dual clutch transmission. Very sensible, practical machine that's vastly underestimated.
You're saying you're vastly underestimated, okay?
It's exactly what I'm saying.
I think I'd be something like a KLR, a bit of a donkey, but gets there in the end, doesn't really give up. Just one foot in front of the other. But nothing special. You wouldn't look at it and go, oh, wow, I desperately want one of those. Hope my wife doesn't listen to this. But everybody should have a shot on one,
But more realistically, I would be the Honda XR650L, wouldn't I? Just something that refuses to change.
Opinionated.
Will never change. And it's just very old-fashioned.
Boring.
And yeah, stuck in its ways.
Suzuki GSX 250. Right, let's move on. This question is for... This is for Clive and Noel, so you have to sit this one out. Sorry, Mark. But we've got some special questions just for you, so... get over yourself. If you woke up one morning and found you'd swap bodies and lives, 80s movie style, what would you like most about being the other person? What would you like most about being the other person?
Oh, Jesus.
Without question, the money.
I'm struggling. Really struggling.
What?
What would I like most about your life?
You would love it.
So
yeah,
bored.
The wood chopping.
You spent 3 days in your van sitting in a campsite looking at the sea.
But you were looking at that thinking, oh my God, if only I could be there.
Waiting for something to happen.
And not here with all these dogs and children.
You've got some nice fields. And Ashley is absolutely lovely too. That's it.
If you two swap bodies, I can imagine Noel blowing your trumpet straight away, Clive.
Lowered the tone.
He's going to have his hand straight on your tuba, mate.
Like the hair would be good.
In the interest of your friendship, let's move to the next one, which is, again, sorry, it's just for Clive and Noel. If and when you finally become the legal dads of young Rory, does someone need to give a backgrounder about that? I don't know.
Everybody knows Rory Orton.
What will you do to tame or alternatively encourage him?
Well, first of all, he is the son of Simon. Simon is his father and always will be his father. But if we are required to become the legal guardians, I would do nothing to tame nor change him. He's perfect in every way.
Simon's done a brilliant job, hasn't he? He's to be applauded. We'd probably just get the handbook off Simon and carry on.
Okay, that's clear. Right. Welcome back, Mark. The three of you are on a chartered plane to South America to ride bikes, of course. And surprise, surprise, you crash in the snowy Andes. Who's getting eaten and in what order?
Well, I think I'd probably die first. Although, if it was out of hunger, I've got lots of natural fat resources for my body to continue living.
Wouldn't that make you a target?
I think you're going to have to buy it first, Noel. I'm sorry, mate. You're probably the most dispensable yet most palatable.
So I've always wondered how I'd cope in a situation like that. I'd like to be tested.
I think I'd run out of high blood pressure medication quite quickly, so it would probably be me that died first, and you could just tuck in, right?
I don't know if I could imagine tucking into Clive. It's quite a statement to make on a podcast, but I don't know if I could imagine it. Who would you like to eat most, Simon?
Next question.
If we invited the audience to map out a fan fiction plot involving the three of you, what kind of story do you think they'd come up with? And, second part of the question, which famous actor would each of you want to play you in a film version of that story?
Fan fiction. That implies we've got fans that are capable of writing fiction. It seems unlikely. Yeah, it'd be a Last of the Summer Wine with motorcycles scenario, I think.
So who are you going to get to play you?
Who's that James Bond character? He looked very much like me.
Judi Dench.
I'm going to go for Jack O'Connell. He's got a similar nose. He's an astonishing actor. He's 33 years old.
I can't even believe you're asking me. It's obviously Brad Pitt, just because of the looks.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure there's any superstars big enough out there, if I'm quite honest. Who would literally fill my shoes?
What's that guy in Emmerdale Farm? He'd be ideal for you.
Zach Dingle?
Probably. I don't know anybody in Emmerdale Farm.
No, I don't.
I'm thinking for Noel, Bill Nighy.
Of course, I'm thinking for Simon, Jerry Seinfeld. You know how to take the reservation. You just don't know how to hold the reservation.
The only reason I started watching Seinfeld back in the 80s or whenever it was because my wife's best friend at the time said, Jerry Seinfeld's exactly like Simon. Seriously. Because I don't think I am at all, but, that's another thing. We'll move on. I think we've got some easier questions now coming up. So quick answers, please, gentlemen. These 3 questions or whatever are for you, Noel. So quick answers, just pass if you really can't answer them. First question, once again, I emphasize I did not write these questions. Do you actually have a job? You seem to have plenty of free time, but still have a shit ton of cool bikes and a rather nice gaff and a very lovely location. What's your secret and can I get some?
Mainly as in inheritance, I think.
Fuck off. That's not. It was don't buy loads of shit you don't need. That's probably number one. See a lot of that going on around me.
Yeah, how are you getting on with your 3 bikes? Yeah.
Different bikes are for different things. Playing that many times, and everyone will know what I'm talking about when I say that. And I don't really have a real job. No, I don't. I just worked very hard for a very long time and worked out that I actually don't need that much money on a day-to-day basis.
Tight as a gnat's chuff.
Question 2. Why don't you ever invite Clive to go on your trips? It must make him very sad.
Because I see enough of him here doing this. This is plenty. I get my fill every 3rd week. We do go away on trips, Clive, don't we? That's not true to say we don't. But I have different little motorcycle gangs. Doesn't everyone have little different motorcycle gangs that do different things?
Nope, just one. I invite you to everything.
I get invited. Well, come on, I'm a victim of circumstance. I've been invited on a few things. I don't feel I'm in a position to invite.
Oh, so it's not your ball, not your game type thing.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault. No.
It's not your fault.
It's not my fault.
It's not your fault.
Question 3. Do you do as little on the podcast as Clive says? What contribution do you make? And do you feel guilty for not doing more?
These questions are incredible. I could have written these myself.
I do probably less than Clive hints at me doing. I really do. As you've described it, Simon, it's my secret sauce. It's turning up, not knowing who's coming on. It's worked very well. It's been much harder when I have done a little bit of research, as I did with Adam Riemann. I found that very difficult because I already kind of knew the answers to the questions. I didn't enjoy it as much personally. Yeah, I do very little. I will have no qualms in saying that Clive absolutely carries this podcast, carried me at the Lightweight Festival, gives me a very, very easy life.
So the last part of the question was, do you ever feel guilty for not doing any more?
No, because I see none of the money.
There is no fucking money. I'm thousands of pounds in debt to this fucking podcast. Fucking stickers, microphones.
And I see none of it. I see none of the debt.
You are very good, though.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You get to keep only one bike from your current collection and never buy any more. So no new bikes. You just get to keep one. Which one would it be?
It's probably the one I bang on about all the time, which is the red XR 650L. I'll probably keep that. It's the one I've had the longest, probably the one I'm most attached to. It's the one I feel that I identify with the most, as previously stated. Yeah, so probably that one. I'd hate to see a couple of the others go, but that's the one that's me, I suppose.
So you've got a red one and I can see a blue one behind you. So you've got 2, but you said different bikes, different jobs. What do they do differently?
They're for different paces, different things. They each come with a different amount of risk involved in whether you'll get home on them or not, and whether they'll be trouble-free for the duration. They're all slightly different, aren't they? It's very different going away on a 1987 bike than it is going away on a new bike.
Final question for you, Noel. Are you Team Mark or Team Jamie?
Well, it's difficult now because we've never talked about this before, but I'm probably related to Jamie. We have the same very rare surname. We look a little bit the same. My father was from his part of the world. We need to do some ancestry.co.uk on it, but yeah.
Can you just answer the question?
Well, I want to say Mark, but I'm related to Jamie. I feel bonded to them both in different ways. They're like bikes. They're for different lightweight adventures for different things.
Cold as ice. I'm literally right here.
Time for you to shine, Mark. Quick one to start with.
It's Clive. I'm most bonded to Clive.
Well, I was going to say Team Noel or Team Clive, but I guess we can move on. If you had to swap Jamie for any other moto influencer, and I feel a bit sick saying that word influencer, but anyway, who would it be?
Yeah, literally line him up. Anybody. Who's got 10 subscribers on YouTube? I'd be too coy to say anybody else. But Jamie, he's not just my sidekick, he literally is my best mate. We were best mates before we were any level of content creators on any description. So no, it's a moot question. Now he's moved abroad and he's been gone already like 3 months. I've had to swap him for a few people and it doesn't feel the same.
Who, if somebody releases a video, who's that person that you watch every single thing they do?
I watch a lot of filmmakers and photographers. I don't really watch any motorcycle content, as weird as that sounds. So I watch a lot of Peter McKinnon and Matty Hopoya before he ditched YouTube, Timo Hopoya, Casey Neistat. I watch all the big American, and then I'll watch like Mark Bone, he's a documentary filmmaker. I watch a lot of those style of things and that's why I was so fascinated when I did Simon's podcast with him, because we talked about story and the art of film as such. And that's what fascinates me to it, because that's what I watch on YouTube. So...
Well, we have to take your first answer anyway. It's Peter McKinnon. Sorry, Jamie.
This is, again, not my personal opinion, but the CRF is a bit shit, admit it. What would your ideal choice of bike be if budget wasn't an issue?
Well, whoever wrote your question can get fucked. It's a bit shit, but it's a bit shit at what? I've just flown out to South America and it'll cover a continent and it'll do it exceptionally well, and I don't care if it gets a bit bashed. So it's not a bit shit at that. Because I also own what I think is inches away from being the perfect TET bike, which is like the 700, 701, 690 series. I've got the 700, obviously, and it's grade A perfect. But every time I get on it, I think it's going to blow up. So it's not perfect, is it? Would I fly that to South America? Not a hope in hell, because I'll kill it, or it'll kill me. In which case, it's a bit shit, isn't it? So it's context-based, and actually the CRF is perfect for what I want it to do. So no, I don't hold that question. I'm hurt.
Good answer.
Actually, that was a very quick round. Sorry, Mark. And what's a bit curious now is there aren't any questions for Clive. Given that Clive handed these questions to me, I've actually started to feel a bit uncomfortable at the moment.
It's a funny series of questions, isn't it?
Simon, how do you view people that don't do podcasts solo? Do you pity them or do you envy them?
Oh, I envy them, because it's, what do they say? Something about the load being shared or halved. Oh, maybe not in your case, but absolutely. Because in real life, I'm far more of a clown than I come across on the podcast. And so I think if I could bounce off someone, it would be like a co-host. I do envy you guys, all of you actually, because you all have co-hosts in your podcast. I enjoy the work of putting the podcast together. So actually, that part doesn't bother me at all. I love that. That's sort of my happy place. But being on the mic is much harder for me. And I really would enjoy having someone to bounce it off with and to be perhaps a little less serious at times. I mean, I feel that I have to be quite serious with my guests because I don't know them most of the time beforehand. And so I out of respect, I because you don't know how people are going to take you if you start being a clown. But
that's something I tried, because I tried to do an interview with somebody. I like to think I'm quite an easygoing person, but actually on podcast or any sort of content, if I'm on my own and I don't know, I'm a bit of a boring, straight-up guy.
Yeah, I didn't say boring, by the way, but okay, we'll take that. Yeah.
No, but that's definitely what I am, and I feel like as soon as Jamie's here, it just gives me the permission almost to be who I actually am, and just always held back by that little bit of respect. Yeah, it's a good point.
Is that the classic sort of 70s and 80s double act thing then going on? You always have kind of one funny idiot and one kind of a straight guy, don't you?
Yeah, they work well in tandem.
That's a well-trodden path, thinking about it, isn't it? From Little and Large,
Abbott and Costello,
through to Morecambe and Wise, Little Jimmy Cranky.
That's a really fair comparison.
We ought to mention, that Mark has kindly joined us tonight, and I hadn't put two and two together. When you said you were going away tomorrow, I just thought you were going to Tenerife tomorrow. I didn't realise it was the big trip.
Big trip starts tomorrow, yeah. Yeah, I literally fly out to Colombia tomorrow.
Blimey.
Luckily, my wife's out at the minute. She's out getting her hair done. She'll be back in, I think, about 5 minutes. So
why is she getting her hair done if you're going away?
Why was the locksmith around? I just don't understand it.
Is everything ticked and crossed and you're all ready to go? There's no last minute panicking about anything?
No last minute bit. Well, yeah, there kind of is. There's always a few last minute bits, like the check-in didn't go as smoothly as I wanted to. For some reason, I couldn't pay for... I wanted a window seat rather than an aisle seat. It was £20 upgrade. I couldn't pay for that, so that's an annoyance tomorrow. So,
come on, you're not doing too badly if that's on the list.
And my bike might get released from customs on Friday, but it might also be Monday, and I don't know. Little things, but nothing's actually happened yet.
But if all goes well, you'll be riding at the weekend.
Yeah, I hope to be riding up to Medellin on Sunday. In answer to your question, how do I feel? I'm shitting myself. I really am. Yeah, I feel really nervous, and it's funny. I've travelled all around the world. I've been to some really spicy places in the world as well, and I've landed with holes in the aircraft before, and yet I feel the most nervous about travel than I ever have done.
You must fully accept that a week in, once you've sort of got into your stride, it's going to feel like second nature, isn't it?
I really hope so, yeah.
I don't even think it'll take that long. Half an hour on the road and you'll be relaxed again. I always feel a little bit nervous whenever I go out on my bike. But as soon as the wheels start rolling, it all goes. Even when I used to race, I used to get so nervous. But as soon as you start, you're good.
Have you been through and this hits me a lot now when I'm going away, through the stage of, what the hell am I doing? Why am I bothering to do this?
I said that to my wife about 3 days ago. She goes, how are you feeling? And I said, well, I'm looking at everything going, why am I doing it? What's the point of all of this? And I know the point, and it's probably a subject matter for our podcast versus yours, but, I'm looking for some deep ethereal answers. Yeah, we laugh, but I think I genuinely am. So I know the point, but I also think, well, maybe I could get that without spending countless thousands, travelling halfway around the world, risking whatever I'm risking, leaving my wife at home to be lonely. It's a big deal, isn't it? But I'll be home for Christmas, I hope, and I'll have some stories. And and I was speaking with Simon at the festival, and I hope to make a film from it. And there's a lot of good reasons that I'm going, and I just need to get over myself a little bit.
And just relish every fucking second of it.
Well, I was speaking with somebody about that at work. I said how guilty I feel for leaving my wife ultimately to go for 4 months. He says, well, you got to pay her back then, haven't you? I was like, that's an interesting phrase. He goes, you've got to pay her back by going full feet into it and just seizing every single opportunity. I was like, yeah, fair. She's given me the golden ticket, so I need to repay her. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
So a massive amount of good luck to Mark. It's Sunday now. He should be in Colombia, hopefully having a great time. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Hopefully it wasn't too self-indulgent. We certainly enjoyed catching up, having a chat. And thank you to everyone that sent questions in. And yeah, I might have snuck a few in there myself and Noel. Anyway, I've been thinking about how to end podcasts. Everybody else seems to have like a little catchphrase at the end, like be excellent to people or a very loud goodbye. All I could come up with so far was don't be a cunt. So I'm going to try that. If you've got any better ideas, let me know on our socials. Right, that's it for this week. Don't be a cunt. See you next time. No, don't be daft. Nobody listens to this end of the podcast. Everybody's switched off by now. It'll be fine. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.